Welcome to Crash Course World History, and today we're going to be talking about the Age of Uncertainty and how it affects us today. The Age of Uncertainty took place after World War I and the Treaty of Versailles. The Age of Uncertainty was exactly how it sounds. People were uncertain of their beliefs. Patriotism is the idea of believing in your nation. Nationalism is the belief that your nation should share similar beliefs, race, and language. Fascism is very similar to both of those, except the only difference with fascism is that if you do not follow those guidelines, that you will be discriminated or banished from that nation. One of the biggest fascist leaders that we have had in our world's history is Adolf Hitler. One of Adolf's biggest talents was his amazing speaking ability. He was able to form the Nazi Party with this skill. The Nazi Party was a part of the Age of Uncertainty because the Nazi Party started questioning the German government. The Nazi Party was an anti-government movement because they did not like how the German government handled the Treaty of Versailles. So here we have a picture of the dictator Adolf Hitler during his reign over Germany. Now, I think that this picture is important because it shows us what he looks like. Now, again, this is a picture of Adolf Hitler, but in this picture, we see the Nazi Party, and we can really get a sense of how big it really was. And we can also tell by this picture how many people Hitler was able to persuade with his amazing and persuasive speaking skills. When Hitler rises into power, he becomes a fascist leader. He believed that everyone living in Germany had to be strictly German. Anyone who does not share a German race, beliefs, religion, language will be banished or kicked out of the nation. We begin to see fascism and Hitler's role when he started sending Jews and many other races to camps. He would send Jews, people with disability, homosexuals, and pretty much anyone who is not German. This will be known as the Holocaust. Another fascist leader in our history is Mussolini. Mussolini is an Italian fascist leader. He often criticized the Italian government, similar to Hitler and the Nazi Party. He created the Black Shirts to help restore peace in Italy. We have had many fascist leaders in our history that have made such giant impacts on our lives today. Now, speaking of fascism, this was the Italian fascist leader, Mussolini. And Mussolini was able to gather the Black Shirts. Now, this is one of the many pictures of the Holocaust. And like I said, the Holocaust was what the Hitler and the Nazi Party would do to these innocent people. Now, these include Jews, homosexuals, people with disabilities. Now, we're going to focus more on communism. Communism is when the government controls everything. Everyone is treated the same when it comes to their amounts of money. There are no high-class families, and there are no low-class families, because the government will take the money and redistribute it fairly or equally. In communism, everyone is treated equal, and they serve under one leader, just like a dictatorship. Some examples of communist leaders are Stalin and Lenin. Lenin is considered one of the original communist leaders. Stalin was also a communist leader in Russia. Now, this is a picture of Stalin, the communist leader over Russia. And again, I think that this picture is important because it shows us what Stalin looked like. So here we have a picture of Lenin. And as you know, he was one of our communist leaders in our history. Now, not only is this picture important because it shows us what he looks like, but Lenin was also considered one of the earliest communist leaders. Another important part of the Age of Uncertainty was the creation of social welfare. Welfare is when citizens get resources from their government because they need them. A lot of people needed welfare after the war for a couple of reasons. One of these reasons are because the soldiers would need government support for their families if they're disabled and unable to work. When some soldiers returned back from war, their jobs were taken and they were left homeless because they were unemployed. Welfare was also given to widows who lost their husband in the war and they were unable to support their family, so they needed welfare in order to survive. Welfare gives the money to people for anything that they may need. Welfare is still used today for people who need government help. There is a problem with welfare today, and that problem is that some people will collect welfare when they don't really need it. So instead of giving that welfare or the money from welfare to people who really need it, they'll take it instead and use it on themselves. So we see how welfare was very important in our history. We can also see how it affects us today. In our history, this was very important after wars because you would often have soldiers who were disabled or who no longer had their husband, and so they couldn't support their families. And so welfare was a really good idea of how the government could help those families. Another giant problem that we see in the Age of Uncertainty is hyperinflation. Now, after World War I, the Treaty of Versailles was signed, and particularly Article 231, or the Guilt Clause, put all of the war blame and debt on Germany. So, as a part of Article 231, Germany had to pay for all of the casualties and damage that were caused by the fighting in World War I. They were in so much debt that they decided to print more money, and this unfortunately led to hyperinflation. This absolutely destroyed the German economy. It got to the point that if you wanted to buy a loaf of bread, that you would have to bring a wheelbarrow full of money. People would also burn money instead of wood because at the time when this inflation was going on, money costs less than it would. So here we have an actual picture of the hyperinflation that Germany had to deal with during this time period. And so he would need all of this money on this wheelbarrow in order to go to the store to just get a loaf of bread. And so in this picture, we see a German woman burning money because, like I said earlier, at the time, money was less valuable than wood. So it would be much cheaper to burn money than it would be to burn the wood. I just wanted to thank you for watching this episode of Crash Course World History about the Age of Uncertainty. This music was taken from Crash Course World History theme on YouTube.